Joe Solosky, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Marcus. I appreciate it.
I'm very happy to talk to you today. You are the managing director of sports betting at NASCAR. That's a pretty cool position. So can you tell us a little bit about what that role includes?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been at NASCAR for almost 2 years now. I came in to oversee the sports betting division at NASCAR. So really anything that touches NASCAR in a sports betting sense falls under my remit. That includes our partnerships with sports books, with data suppliers, integrity suppliers, media outlets who cover sports betting. It also covers market access and NASCAR's involvement in states where legalization is happening, and leagues and teams are becoming involved, which is becoming somewhat of a trend here in the United States, and hopefully continues in that fashion. But yeah, really anything from our media rights to partnerships and sales, anything that touches this kind of new and emerging space, I cover at NASCAR.
That's interesting. And yeah, you started in March 2021. And as most people know, at least who listen to this podcast, is that sports betting in the US took a turn in 2018. And it's not yet legalized in all states, but in more states. So how has this affected your job, and how is that? I mean, I guess that's something you're still working with every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in terms of, my background on that. So I've been working in sports betting before it legalized in the US. So I had a little bit of a background before it was legalized. So I worked for Sportradar for 6 years total, but 3 years in Europe from 2015 to 2018. And I got to kind of see how mature markets operate from Europe to Asia to Africa. And then when PASPA was repealed, I moved back over to the US with Sportradar and got to work with US operators as they were becoming established here in the US as states started to roll out. So at NASCAR, I feel like, and I'm will not speak for NASCAR itself because I wasn't there in 2018, but NASCAR was really on the vanguard, I believe, in terms of leagues, in terms of embracing sports betting and what it meant for the league in terms of how it could potentially grow ticket sales and broadcast audience and just the fan base generally, and encourage and invigorate the current fan base as well, giving them another option to engage with the sport. And when I joined in March of 2021, we were already set up with some great partnerships. The first thing NASCAR did was sign an integrity deal with Sportradar, which is still in place, and then from there, going forward after the league learn more about the integrity and setting that up for our employees and our athletes, getting involved in the sponsorship and marketing space with sports betting as well.
Yeah, this has so many different and interesting aspects. So you alluded to it there a little bit. So how important is sports betting for the fan experience?
It's not, I wouldn't say it's super important. If you're looking at NASCAR from a holistic level, I'm very siloed in the organization in terms of covering sports betting, which is important to the league, no doubt about it. But in terms of the whole fan experience, sports betting is important in the sense that it is a way to potentially bring new fans on board, fans of legal betting age who maybe aren't watching the sport, to get them to watch the sport. I wouldn't say it's a, top three initiative in terms of or top three experience. When you think about NASCAR, you don't think about betting right away, and that's probably because as you see in studies, about 20% of fans will bet on sports. So we're looking at a ceiling of 20% of our fans, and not the whole group.
And yeah, so also, I mean, for the fan experience, but also for fan engagement, is one additional way for the fans to engage with the sport.
Yeah, and there's a layered approach to doing that. From pre-2018 with fantasy to daily fantasy to free to play games, to contests, that you see on TV around free to play games, etc. There's a bunch of ways to get people kind of in the mindset of wagering if it's not legal in your state yet. And then once it is legal in your state, or, it's especially if NASCAR runs a race there, it's imperative is on us to educate our fans, make them aware that this is available, but also more importantly, how to do so responsibly, and what it means, right? Like we did a set of 101 sports betting videos last year just to talk about what a race winner market looks like, what a top 5 market looks like, what to look for when you're betting on those markets, so you're not you're not taking a bad price. So it's really the education and awareness front that we want to take as we look at this as kind of a crawl, walk, run approach.
And how has your experience from Europe helped you, since here it's a more mature market, as you said before, and it's online betting has been legal for, it's been here as long as I can remember, at least. So for you who has worked in Europe, can you take some learnings from that now when you work in the States?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's something that I think about a lot, and I try not to let it put blinders on me, but I also think about this is a marathon, not a sprint. So, when we're looking at partnerships or, terms, I'm always looking at 5-10 years down the line and what this market is going to look like. And I'm not saying that I know what it is going to look like, because it's changed so much just in the last 3.5 years, or 4.5 years since legalization. But, I look at mature markets in terms of consumer behavior, the products that are out there, and that's where I kind of look forward, right? In terms of the iGaming side, iGaming will eventually be legal in more than 6 states, right? So how does NASCAR get involved in iGaming? Virtual sports is another one. Virtual sports is 5% of a sports book in a mature market. So how does NASCAR get ahead of the curve with virtual sports? A great downtime product is virtual sports. So, Monday through Friday when we're not racing, or Monday through Thursday when we're not racing, there's an opportunity for fans to engage, become educated on betting on the sport. And even just, how the US is different as well. I acknowledge that in terms of, how we were conditioned to play fantasy sports and daily fantasy sports, and looking at more athlete performance as opposed to overall team performance, and why player props and player markets are so important to have out there relatively early. I feel, in the maturity of this product is something that we look at, and is one of the reasons that we launched a focus on matchup betting for NASCAR. So head-to-head driver matchups is something that we've really been pushing versus just outright race winner, because of that, US behavior pattern we've seen over the last 3.5 years of focusing on player performance and prop betting and same game parlays.
That's very interesting. And so from Europe, can people bet on NASCAR from Europe if there is a race in the States, for example, or how does that work?
Yeah, they can. So we have an official data feed that is licensed and sold by data supplier, and they can offer that in Europe. We haven't seen a ton of handle or volume overseas on NASCAR. We have a live streaming product that's overseas for NASCAR, that we have seen success in certain jurisdictions, especially given the time difference. If a race is happening at 3 p.m. on a Sunday, that could be 9 p.m. in Germany, right, when there might not be anything else going on that Sunday evening. So we see a little spike in activity on NASCAR in those jurisdictions. But to that point, we do have international race series that is continuing to expand, globally for NASCAR. So whether it's in Mexico or Canada or Europe or some jurisdictions like Brazil that we're looking to get into, I feel like that's going to help in more mature markets in terms of educating fans and making it more of a commonplace sport to bet on.
Another aspect of gaming is some issues that might arise as a result from it. We talk about gambling addiction, match fixing, different type of corruption. I know that the betting companies, they are allocating some funds to the to handle this type of issues. What is NASCAR doing to prevent or react to this aspect?
Yeah, so we are super proactive on that front. This topic of integrity, responsible gaming is one that one that keeps me up at night in this role, right? In terms of not wanting to be, the next league that has some sort of scandal or some sort of issue around players or employees violating the rules on sports betting. So at NASCAR, our policy is that NASCAR employees, drivers, everyone falls under the same policy of you cannot bet on NASCAR. And that goes beyond just a stated policy in our rule book. It's a tutorial that Sportradar puts on, our integrity partner puts on each and every year that we have to take. It's evolving into in-person seminars with our drivers, crew members in terms of the vulnerability. In NASCAR, if you've been to a race, you see the access that you get as a fan. It's unparalleled in US sports. You can be interacting with a crew member. You can take a selfie with the driver right before the race. We really give fans access, which is one of the great joys of being involved in this sport, and the happiness it brings to kids and fans who are at the track. But with that, comes risks as well from the betting side in terms of potential match fixing and corruption, like you mentioned. So we get in front of our drivers and teams and talk to them about that, with perspectives from, maybe professional athletes from mature markets who have been in those situations themselves, and what it costs them from a financial, reputational, and career perspective. So it's something that we're very in front of. We're partnered with a bunch of different organizations, from the American Gaming Association, which is more fan facing. So if you go to a NASCAR event, you'll see activations around, having a game plan and responsible gaming for our fans. And then in-house, it's really, really my job, along with competition, to make sure that our drivers and teams are aware of not only what the policy is, but how we arm them to really participate in that policy hand in hand with us, and to not fall in, slip up like we've seen with some other leagues over the last couple of years, or some other players in those in other leagues in the last couple of years.
Yeah. And both of us have a relationship to SIGA, the Sports Integrity Global Alliance. You have been speaking on some of their events, and I am a partner of them with this podcast. So, and I just finished a book on match fixing, so it's it's on top of my head right now. So it's a very, very interesting topic, and it's great to hear that you're proactive on this very important issue.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, especially since it's early days, there are so many things that we have to react to on the fly. We're not going to think of everything from a match fixing perspective, from a policy perspective, and we have to be flexible. And luckily, our drivers understand that, our employees understand that, and it's something that we have to be very agile in reacting to, but also being proactive with. And I appreciate all the organizations like SIGA that exist to help us as a league, whether it's advisement or opportunities to speak, to talk about that.
Do you have in your department, do you have some allocated resources for this integrity part, or is everyone that's, for everyone to work on?
Yeah, so my department, we do have allocated resources toward integrity, and it's not only my division. Actually, our competition division does, our legal division does. So it really is a team approach at NASCAR when it comes to thinking about integrity, because it touches every part of the sport.
Yeah. If we're talking about NASCAR in general and the interest for NASCAR, I feel like motorsports in general has gotten a lift since the Formula One. They have their Netflix documentary, but also for IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula One in general is, I feel, becoming more popular. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Drive to Survive series, I've watched it. As someone who's relatively new to motorsports, coming into this role at NASCAR, I really didn't have experience in motorsports. So for me, I looked at every opportunity to learn about it, and Drive to Survive is one of those ways. And I think it's a way that people who weren't into motorsports before are getting into it. So oftentimes when I host people at races, they'll kind of ask me the Drive to Survive equivalent of, what, the paddock is in NASCAR, or what does the start look like at NASCAR compared to what they see with the lights for F1. So if that's the way that they get into it, and if that's what gets them to a NASCAR race, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I believe in that fully. And, one of the things that we're looking to do over the next year or two is to get more motorsports leagues approved for sports betting in the US, whether they're NASCAR or not, because like I said, a rising tide lifts all boats. The more volume of races that are available to be bet on, not just Saturday and Sunday, again, raises fans' awareness on what's available to be bet on, encourages them to be more educated on it, may encourage them to tune in to watch the race if they bet on it. And the ultimate goal is to really get fans to come to a race who haven't been before, because as I can attest to, having never been to a NASCAR race before I started working for the organization, once you go to a race, you realize why it is so popular, because it's just such a sensory experience. It's such a fan-friendly experience. And, it's hard not to go back to one once you've already been to one.
I understand. I actually haven't been to one myself, so I don't know how much presence NASCAR has in Europe.
Yeah, we do have a European series, and actually we're going to be doing a very unique race in Finland next year, which I could send you some more information on.
Yes, please. That's next door.
Mm-hmm.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So on that with the Formula One, so you think that that's actually Formula One is actually helping the interest for NASCAR, and you don't see it as a direct competitor that steals, quote unquote, your fans, as you said, a tide rises all boats.
Yeah, I there might be some aspects where there is competition, but from a sports betting perspective, I don't think so. Especially when you look at it from a sports betting perspective, they're two very different products to bet on. At least let's just look at it right now. Or in the last couple of years, NASCAR can be a high variance sport. If you look at the odds for the Daytona 500, or just a random race during the week that's not a super speedway, the shortest odds are going to be around plus 350, plus 400. As you've seen in Formula One over the last 4 years, depending on whether it's Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen, they can be minus 700 or minus 800 to win a race. So the variance in NASCAR provides a little bit more, I think, excitement or variability in the bets. You may think that, it's true. We had the most single event, race winners this year, than we have had in a long time in a NASCAR season. So we had, I think ended up being 17 different winners throughout the season in NASCAR. So, if you're betting on outrights to win a race, there's a lot more variability as opposed to Formula One when it comes to a product perspective. But I don't see it as a threat. And I think there's a lot of best practices to be learned, how F1 approaches the betting space as they continue to explore it. They may take learnings from what NASCAR has done, and as they explore it, I'm keen to learn from them as well in terms of how their product has performed, in Europe, and how that can translate to the US.
Are you speaking to someone at Formula One or IndyCar to exchange ideas?
No, not at Formula One, or I have spoken to IndyCar. I've spoken to other motorsports organizations as well around getting into sports betting, but not Formula One specifically.
Okay. Yeah, but I guess there are learnings that can be drawn from these different motorsports.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. If we look a little bit into your career, you mentioned that you have been at the Sportradar, but you have also worked for New York Yankees, and you have been in the US Navy. So can you tell us a little bit about how you started out and how you ended up where you are right now?
Yeah, I have a bit of a serpentine path to sports betting, probably not replicable, but I think one theme that listeners and watchers can glean is kind of that persistence and following your passion. So as you mentioned, I was in the Navy. I graduated from the Naval Academy. Shortly thereafter, I got a bad back injury that didn't allow me to serve as long as I wanted to. I did not know. So I got out of the Navy. I did not know what I was going to do for my career. All I knew was that I was a huge Yankees fan, baseball fan, and I flew down to spring training in Tampa, and literally on the spot got a role with them interning for the 2009 season, which was just a tremendous exposure, great experience, a great thing to have in my career, and learning tool for me. At the same time, after that season was done, I realized that I still had that passion to serve, which is what caused me to want to go to the Naval Academy and be in the Navy. So I went back to DC and I waited tables at a restaurant right next to the FBI headquarters building in the hopes that it would help me meet someone who worked there and get a job. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, it took several months, but I got a job with the FBI from waiting tables at a restaurant next door. And I worked there for 6 years, and I actually was going to do that for my career. And then my wife commissioned in the Army, and she got stationed in Germany, and that kind of put that on hold at the very least. And I moved overseas with her with really no backup plan in terms of a career. So I started freelance writing for a sports technology website, became more familiar with became aware of how mature sports betting was in Europe and then globally shortly thereafter. And started applying blindly for jobs in the sports betting space in Europe, and Sportradar gave me a chance. So, it's a combination of kind of following my passion and persistence and taking some risks. And that's what landed me into sports betting. And, coming back to the US as someone who had experience overseas, there probably wasn't many of us. And I've really enjoyed parlaying that from the data side with Sportradar to the league side, because like I said earlier, sports betting is not the first, second, or third thing you think of when you think of NASCAR, but it's really important to us as a league to help grow our sport. And if this is a way I can help educate my fellow coworkers on how it impacts their businesses and how it can help the sport grow, our fans who attend races, it's really a dream job for me.
I'm happy to hear that you ended up on a job that, is your dream job. I actually I have read that you have said that in another interview as well. But going back to the FBI job, that's the most creative way I've heard ever, how to get a job, to wait table in the restaurant next door. How did you come up with that?
I mean, I was 24 years old, and I had whether it was I read a book, or I feel like a lot of little kids grow up wanting to be FBI agents, but I was 24, I was young, and I figured the FBI was probably the next best thing to serving in the military, and I really wanted to pursue that. So I didn't have any other backgrounds or qualifications really to get me into the FBI, or just other than applying blindly for jobs. So I thought leaning on my networking skills would be the best. So, I mean, there were other things I did, right? I went to job conferences. I reached out to alumni networks who worked there. But there wasn't anything that was, a green light saying like, hey, let's take you on board. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I waited on a table of executives there. They saw my Naval Academy ring. They said, what are you doing waiting tables as a Naval Academy graduate? And, had to explain my situation, my background, what I wanted to do. And they created a role for me, essentially. I'm forever grateful for that, because it led to a 6-year career at the FBI, or 6-year tenure at the FBI. And I love that organization. There are a lot of parallels actually between how the FBI and the culture of it to NASCAR, in terms of, very familial, very family friendly. And I really appreciate that in terms of having a mission that's larger than yourself, as part of your day job.
Yeah, for sure. And as you said, like FBI, I guess are many kids' dream to work for. So how was it like to work for FBI? You said it was very familiar, but how else?
Yeah, I mean, it was really eye-opening, right? Because I remember vividly going to orientation and wondering, like, what am I getting access to when I start day one, right? Can I just start going in systems and looking up all these, crazy things? And just like any other job, you have a task that you have to do. For me, it was IT and cyber related stuff. So, I had a boss that I worked for who handled certain projects, certain support functions for agents who are doing, who are investigating cases. And my job was to really support that. So that's how I started. And then as I kind of advanced up in my career at the FBI, I realized, where I fit in and what I was good at. I wanted to be an agent. That was my end goal. I made a jump to working in the leadership development program, which was a passion project for me. training other agents and support staff at the FBI on management skills, onboarding executives, getting to work with leaders at the bureau and seeing kind of what their backgrounds were, what their strengths were, what made people respect them. There's a lot of different career paths you can take in the government. The FBI specifically, you can be an analyst, you can be a mail clerk, you can be an agent, you can be a street agent your whole life, you can be an executive if you want to move around. There are a lot of opportunities there. And ultimately I didn't get to make a career out of it, but the 6 years that I had there taught me a lot. It gave me a lot of perspective, and it also gave me, lifelong friends, from working there, because like I said, it was a very familial organization.
This inner drive to serve for the Navy and to be an FBI agent, what is it that intrigues you with these type of roles?
I think overall it's your incentives, or my incentives, right? I was never really driven by financial incentives. It was, for whatever reason, whether I was raised, my values, it was those kind of intangible incentives. What made me want to join the military to start was 9/11. I was 16 years old, lived 17 miles from Manhattan. And from there, I knew I wanted to be in the military. So, not a lot of people know what they want to do for their career, or know what drives them maybe that early. For me, that was a moment for me that was seminal. And it's definitely, I've definitely kind of fishtailed throughout my career. When I was in the FBI, and when I was interning for the Yankees for no money, certainly was not financially motivated. But when I was at Sportradar, I'll be honest, I was more financially motivated because I was in sales. That was a new experience for me. And I was, encouraged to get deals done with a whole bunch of different stakeholders. And that was something that I had to adjust to. It wasn't what made me the happiest, obviously. I was always looking to see how I could parlay my experience in sports betting into something bigger, where I could assist a larger organization where it wasn't necessarily just sports betting. And I'm lucky to have landed at NASCAR, where, again, it's a small part of what can help make us grow. But I'm much more incentivized by the pride I take in where I work, right? Like, I love just telling people, I work for the Yankees, or I'm in the Navy, or I'm in the FBI. I took a lot of pride in that. And certainly I loved my time at Sportradar, but not many people knew who Sportradar was. So I wouldn't go out there and say hey, I work for Sportradar, but wearing NASCAR gear, telling people I work for NASCAR, representing the brand, is something that I'm really proud to do. And that's really probably part of those kind of intangible incentives that drive me.
I understand. Being in the Navy, FBI, you said that you had a leadership training as well. Now you're a managing director. So how would you describe your leadership style?
Yeah, I mean, it's evolving. I acted very independently at Sportradar, my previous role, for 6 years, where I didn't really manage anyone. I had peer leadership opportunities across a bunch of different jurisdictions, or not jurisdictions, let's just call them geographic regions, right? So having to get to learn different cultures, like, how the Asian culture does business, how the Nigerian culture does business, how the South African culture does business. And while I wasn't really managing anyone, I understood how different people worked, how they were motivated, what motivated them, and really took that to heart as I communicated with different people, worked with different people, understood that their style wasn't the same as mine. So now at NASCAR, where I have the opportunity to lead others, whether it's at the peer level or have people work underneath me, it's really understanding their background, what their values are. I've always been a very relationship-driven person, in any sort of whether it's our integrity partnership, our data partnership, our operator partnerships at NASCAR, my relationship with government affairs, the legal side. I pride myself on having a good relationship. And that all starts with getting to know the people around you. So for me as a leader, it's providing a a manageable but challenging onboarding for the people who, you know, are under my remit, and then also allowing them to flourish. So, you know, that I'll give an example. I mean, I brought someone on board 6 months ago who had a much stronger knowledge base of NASCAR than I do, but was new to the organization. So, you know, we spent 6 or 7 months this past year getting to work together really closely, getting to know him, and now I feel like this year, you know, we can really divvy up and you know, be more efficient in how we work with partners, because we know each other's kind of you know, what motivates us and how we get things done better.
I feel like thinking about like US Navy, you think, I think at least like David Goggins, this like really, really tough guys, you know, strict and tough. But it doesn't seem like that's your leadership style. You seem more like seeing the person and, you know, having the group dynamic. But do you have that type of, you know, tougher style as well as you might need in the Navy or in FBI maybe?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think there's a right place and right time for it. You know, when you're talking about national security and, you know, military diplomacy, I think the stakes are a lot higher. So, you know, you can certainly be, you know, have a high emotional intelligence and, you know, read the room, but knowing the stakes are so high, you also have to, you know when to be firm and understand that it's very serious work. It's very serious work what we do at NASCAR as well, but it's not national security or military diplomacy, right? So I think bringing in a military atmosphere to a organization like a sports league is just not efficient. It's not the right thing to do. Talking about kind of diverse backgrounds and experiences, I think that having, yes, veterans in the workforce in all organizations is very helpful, because like I said, there's a right place and right time. There's experiences that you get in the military at, you know, very young ages to lead others that you don't get elsewhere. And I feel like from a peer perspective, that motivates others, it inspires others. So there's, you know, there's different leadership styles, I think, for different situations. And at NASCAR, you know, it really is an organization where it's important to have a good working relationship with all the different divisions at the sport. And I don't think you're going to get that by being, you know, a tough guy, for lack of a better words, or having this kind of hard facade. Again, for me, it's all about relationship building. You know, I feel as if I'm authentic in what I do. And if something gets me upset, I suppose, or I'm unhappy with something, I'm sure that will show, but it's not how I generally approach things.
I understand. That makes sense. What is your best advice for people with the ambitions to work in the sports industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not different from any advice I would give if you wanted to work in any industry. It's the ability to be, you know, if you look at kind of the experiences that I laid out for myself, and like I said, I wouldn't necessarily replicate them, because, you know, took a lot of, easily could have worked, you know, waiting tables for a while, ended up doing something else, right? But I think it's you have to go above and beyond. If you really know what you want to do, first of all, that's a good thing. If you want to work in the sports industry, you know that. So you're going to spend time on LinkedIn trying to find other people who graduated from the same college, went to the same high school, you know, who you can reach out to and get advice from. And how to do that tactfully and correctly is another good lesson learned, and something that I didn't master until probably a couple of years of networking, where, you know, you don't want to just reach out to someone asking for a job, right? You want to get to know them. And then if they, you know, if your passion is true and authentic, it'll come across. And if there's an opportunity that they have for you, you know, they'll find it. But it really is all about that kind of hustling. You know, if you really want to work in the sports industry, then spend time on LinkedIn, again, looking for mutual contacts or any way to break in. Be willing to take an internship. You know, be willing to, you know, invest in further education, whether it's college or graduate school. Those are great networking and factories to, send you into the sports world, whether it's for internships or full-time jobs. And also to, one thing I've learned working in the sports industry is to, you have to know when to put your blinders on as well, right? Like if you want to work in sports, you're probably a huge sports fan, but you can't go to a league or a team and then start, geeking out over seeing players and the access you have. It's certainly something that I appreciated and definitely things I slipped up on when I was interning for the New York Yankees. But you also have to realize that you're part of an organization and you're not really, you can still be a fan, but probably not while you're working. But I think it's a great industry to work in. I can't speak for the other leagues, but for NASCAR itself is a terrific league to work for. Everyone I've gotten to know at the other leagues have been the same in terms of collaborative. We all compete on some level, but from a collaboration standpoint, I couldn't speak more highly of NASCAR.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also I spoke to Andrew Brandt, the sports lawyer and the former executive in NFL. And he said that when people apply for jobs for him or he gives advice, and he said the worst thing you can say is that I love sports and like being a fan. Like the companies don't need fans. They need someone who can actually contribute something.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because my experience with NASCAR was a lot different, right? When I was interviewing for the job, I was very blunt in saying that I was not a fan of NASCAR. I didn't know much about it. Of course, I can learn the sport, but I wanted them to know that I did not have an experience following the sport. I even stressed in my interviews, trying to remember what NASCAR stood for and who some of the drivers were. And luckily I wasn't asked any of those things, but, I was almost the opposite. But now that I've been in this sport for, almost 2 years and have been to 25 races, it is cool when you're at a NASCAR race and you just have a driver walk next to you, walk up next to you. And I think from a fan experience perspective, and when I bring whether it's family or friends to a race and they get to see that, even if they're not a fan, they know who Bubba Wallace is, and who Kyle Larson is, and if they see someone like that, it's cool. So I definitely now experience that in the role too, but it's something that is probably a really good piece of advice for people as well, is to kind of put that enthusiasm of like how big of a fan you are to the side and show more of what you can contribute to the organization, like channel that into what you can contribute. Yeah,
for sure. And what does NASCAR stand for? Is it North American Sports Car Racing, something like that?
No, it's the National Association of Stock Car and for Stock Car and Automotive Racing.
Oh, that wasn't even close. All right. Then I learned something new today, or many things actually, but that's one of them.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the beginning that you had a back injury, which stopped your career in the Navy. Have you had any other bumps on the road in your career? And if so, how did you overcome them? Or is that the biggest one?
That was the biggest one for sure. Because I thought I'd be in the Navy for 10 years at least. So after 10 months, to say that like the plan that you had for the next 9.5 years is no longer the plan, it definitely, threw me for a loop. When my, it's I suppose a first world problem, but when my wife got stationed in Germany, and I had to resign from the FBI, that was another big one, but that was something that I chose. My wife and I chose that path. So that was, maybe some false confidence, but it was like, hey, I've done this before. I can do it again type thing. And I did land on my feet. I ended up in a different industry. I thought I would go back to the FBI after my 3 years in Germany, but being in this industry, as I didn't anticipate, is something that I wanted to see through and can continue doing.
You couldn't work undercover in Germany for FBI?
I don't think so. I don't think that really falls under their remit. I think that's more CIA.
I see.
Yeah.
I understand.
Plus my German isn't that good.
Okay. I see. Approaching the end here, is there something that I haven't asked you that you feel is important to mention?
One of the things that I guess just want to plug around NASCAR, in addition to obviously all the things about our upcoming season that are really exciting, including our race in LA that in 3 weeks, and our Chicago street course race, which we'll be doing for the first time this year. You mentioned earlier on in this interview was around the growth of motorsports, and one of the statistics that I'm really proud of this year is that every state reports differently in the U.S. from a handle or turnover perspective, but Illinois is a state that reports by sport. So it's really the one state we can see sport by sport growth. And Illinois in 2022 versus 2021, NASCAR grew 97% year over year from a handle perspective. The second closest sport was hockey at 76%. And then every other sport, including, NFL, NBA, golf, MLB, were around high 30s to low 40s percentages. So, when you look at, it's easy to say NASCAR is growing, and there are a lot of KPIs out there to show that. But something I'm really proud of is that NASCAR has grown way more. If you look at, looking at that, just that one data point in a state that's not necessarily, one of the, let's call it NASCAR country, to have that growth, I feel like we're seeing that everywhere if we could get the same data.
That's great news, and incredible growth in 1 year. It's really interesting to follow the next couple of years, see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to hopefully sharing more in a couple of years when we have more successes.
Definitely looking forward to the Joe Solosky 2.0 later on.
Absolutely.
Before I let you go, the last question that I ask everyone is, if you can choose the next guest on this podcast, who do you think that I should talk to?
I think you should have someone who handles sports betting for Formula One. That's it's a little biased to what we talked about earlier. And like I said, I haven't spoken to anyone from F1 about betting. I've done a lot of research in terms of what their stance on betting has been historically and how that's changed over the last few years. But it's something you don't hear a lot about in terms of their sponsorships, and would just be curious to understand how that league is approaching it. So that's my insight.
Yeah, that's a good one. I will research and see what I find. Let's see if I can make it happen.
Yeah.
Joe Solosky, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management podcast.
Thanks so much, Marcus. Appreciate the opportunity.